Chapter 1. I found out my marriage was over from a single text message sent while I was still at work, behind the counter of my own store. In one sentence, my husband admitted he drained our joint account, booked a trip to Miami with another woman, and thought I would collapse quietly and clean up the mess like I always did. He didn't know that I had already been paying attention, saving proof, protecting myself, and that by the time he laughed at the end of that message, his plan had already started to fall apart. My name is Rowan, and this is the moment I stopped trying to save my marriage and started saving my life. The first time my marriage ended, it happened between a receipt printer and a half-folded cash drawer. I was starting behind a counter of Harbor and Hush, smoothing the tissue paper over a linen wrap dress a customer had decided she absolutely needed for a holiday dinner. The store smelled like cedar hangers and citrus hand soap, the kind of calm scent you buy on purpose because you want people to exhale the moment they walk in. Outside, downtown Annapolis was already dark, the shop windows glowing like little stages along Main Street. I smiled the way I always did, steady and warm. I asked if she wanted a gift receipt. I told her the fabric was forgiving and flattering, because it was, and because women deserve to feel like themselves in their own skin. I slid the bag across the counter and watched her walk out with her shoulders a little lighter. That was the moment my phone vibrated. I glanced down expecting my assistant manager, Kiara, to be texting about closing duties. Or maybe my sister asking what time I would be home. The screen lit up with the name I still had saved as Daniel, with a red heart I had never bothered to delete. I picked up the phone with one hand, the other still resting on the counter, as if I could anchor myself there. The message was short, too short for what it was. I want a divorce. I drained the joint account. Don't call me. I'm heading to Miami with Avery. We're done. Good luck. Ha. For a second, I didn't understand the words. I understood English. I understood every word on its own, but together they felt like a prank written by someone who had never met my husband, someone who didn't know the way he always double-checked the front door at night, the way he said my name like it was something he'd chosen and was proud of. My eyes went back to the end of the message, that last little laugh. Ha! Like I was a joke. My throat tightened, but I kept my face still. I could hear the ceiling speakers playing some slow acoustic cover, a voice pretending heartbreak was romantic. I could hear the humming of the refrigeration unit in the back, where I kept bottled water for customers. Normal sounds, normal night, the world refusing to acknowledge that mine had just shifted. I set the phone down on the counter, screen facing down, like it was a hot pan and I didn't want it to burn me. Kiara walked out from the fitting room area carrying a pile of hangers. She was 26, sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who could read a customer's mood before they even touched a rack. "You good, Rowan?" she asked, casual but watching me. Rowan, that was me now. Rowan Pierce, 42 years old, the owner of a boutique but I'd built from nothing but an overpriced lease and stubbornness. I said 42 the way I said my own address, because I had lived in that number. Daniel was 48. We'd been married 14 years. Those facts were supposed to mean stability. They were supposed to mean history counted for something. I nodded. I heard my own voice come out even. Yeah, just a text. Kiara raised one eyebrow. She didn't ask more. She knew better than to pry when someone was trying to hold a crack together with sheer will. She moved toward the register. I watched her hands count the bills, her nails tapping lightly against the drawer. My body was doing what it always did in crisis. It went into function mode. If I kept moving, if I kept doing tasks, maybe the reality couldn't catch me. I walked to the front door and flicked the sign to closed. I turned the deadbolt. My hands didn't shake. That was the part that scared me. I had expected shaking. I had expected tears. I had expected a sound, some kind of alarm inside my chest. Instead, there was a sudden, clean coldness, like the moment right before snow begins. I walked back to the counter, I picked up my phone again, and read the message one more time, slower. My eyes snagged on the sentence about the joint account. I opened my bank app, I didn't even tell myself not to. My thumb knew what to do. I typed in my passcode. The screen loaded. The joint account balance was almost zero. It wasn't empty in a poetic way. It was empty in a number way. A few dollars and some cents left, like a cruel tip. I stared at the number. I remembered the last time Daniel kissed me goodbye in our kitchen, mug of coffee in his hand, saying he had a late meeting. I remembered thinking he looked tired. I remembered feeling sorry for him. I thought about the mortgage payment that drafted automatically, the utilities, the payroll that came out of my business account, separate, always separate, because I ran Harbor and Hush like a real company, not a hobby. I thought about my own savings, the money I had moved months ago when my stomach started warning me, and I had finally listened. Now I understood what that responsibility had been. Kiara's voice cut through the silence. "You want me to stay with you while you close?" she asked, as if it was about safety, as if a dark parking lot was the biggest threat. I looked up at her. For a second, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to confess everything. I wanted someone to hear it out loud so it couldn't live only inside my ribs. But my mouth said, "No, I'm okay. Go on. I've got it." She hesitated. Then she nodded, grabbed her coat, and headed for the back. A minute later, the door to the storage room clicked shut behind her. I heard her footsteps go down the hallway to the employee exit. Then the quiet deepened, the kind of quiet you only get when you're alone in a place that usually holds other people's voices. I stood there and let my eyes wander across my store. The racks I had chosen, the displays I had built with my own hands, the brass mirror that I dragged in from a flea market and polished until it shone. I had made this place a sanctuary for women who wanted to feel put together when their lives were messy. I had made it a small, safe world. And now, someone I had trusted was trying to take my safety by hitting the one place he thought I would make me panic. The money, the shared money, the money he assumed I needed him for. I picked up my phone and went back to the message thread. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have typed 100 things. I could have begged. I could have screamed. I could have asked him names like I hadn't seen the clues, like I hadn't watched his attention slide away from me in slow motion. Instead, I did nothing. I tapped the top of the screen and took a screenshot, then another just in case the first didn't catch the timestamp. I saved it. I emailed it to my work account and my personal account because I had learned the hard way that technology fails at the worst times. Then I opened my Notes app and wrote the date and the time. I wrote, "Daniel texted divorce, admitted draining joint account, named Avery, mentioned Miami." I didn't do it because I was plotting revenge. I did it because I suddenly understood the game I had been forced into. This was not a fight about feelings. This was a fight about paper trails. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Daniel appeared. "You're quiet. Don't bother calling. The money's mine too. You never deserved it anyway." My jaw tightened. There it was. Not just leaving, not just cheating, the contempt. I took another screenshot. I forwarded it to my email again. I could feel my heartbeat now, not fast but heavy. It was the kind of heartbeat you get when you realize your life has been sitting on a trap door and someone has finally kicked it open. I walked through the store turning off lights, one by one. The back corner went dark, the fitting room lights clicked off, the front window spotlights dimmed until the mannequins looked like pale ghosts along Main Street. At the register, I pulled out the cash drawer and locked it in the safe. I wrote down tomorrow's deposit amount. I did every step the same way I always did, because routine was the only thing holding me upright. Before I left, I stood by the front door and looked back one last time. Harbor and Hush was quiet and intact. My marriage was not. I stepped outside into the cold air. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. Somewhere a bar door opened and laughter spilled out, warm and careless. I pulled my coat tighter and walked to my car. When I slid into the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat with my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the grain of the leather under my palms. I thought about calling my best friend. I thought about calling my sister. I thought about driving straight to Daniel's office and making a scene that would satisfy the part of me that wanted him to hurt the way I was hurting. Instead, I opened my phone, looked at the screenshots in my camera roll, and then closed it again. I breathed in slowly through my nose, breathed out through my mouth. I turned the key, the engine pot, the dashboard lights glowed, and I drove home in silence, my eyes on the road, my mind already shifting from shock to something steadier, something colder, something that felt a lot like clarity. Chapter 2. Clarity is a strange thing. It does not arrive like sunlight. It shows up like a hard edge you can finally hold on to. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, the porch light set on a timer Daniel used to brag about, like it proved he took care of us. I sat for a moment with the engine running, listening to the tick of the heater and my own breathing. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet people pay extra for. When I stepped inside, the air smelled like whatever detergent we bought in bulk and the lemon candle I kept on the kitchen counter. Everything looked the same. The framed photo of us at the Outer Banks, the bowl for keys, the stupid little sign that said home in cursive, a gift from Martha that I never liked but kept anyway. I kicked off my shoes and walked straight to the kitchen table. I set my phone down and opened my notes again, not because I wanted to relive it, but because I needed the facts to stay clean. Date, time, words. The exact words. I had not been completely blindsided. That is what I kept thinking as I stared at the grain of the wood under my forearms. Not in the way people mean when they pretend they saw everything coming and want to sound wise. I mean, my body had been noticing before my pride would let my brain admit it. A few months earlier, Daniel started coming home late in a way that was inconsistent, which somehow made it worse. If it had been every Thursday, I could have called it work. If it had been a regular pattern, I could have adjusted. Instead, it was random Tuesdays, then a Sunday afternoon, then a Friday where he texted at 8:30 saying he would be home soon and didn't walk in until after midnight. The first time, I asked gently, "Long day?" He laughed like I was adorable. "Yeah, budget meetings, you know how it is." The second time, I noticed his shirt smelled like a hotel lobby, that generic clean scent that is not detergent and not cologne. I asked, "Did you grab dinner?" He said, "I ate at the office." He did not look at me when he said it. He went straight to the sink and rinsed his coffee mug that was still half full, like he needed his hands busy. Then there was the spending. We had always been comfortable. I did well with Harbor and Hush, and Daniel had a steady corporate salary with benefits and a retirement plan he mentioned any chance he got. We did the boring, responsible adult things: auto drafts, a shared calendar, a joint account for household bills, separate accounts for personal spending because that had been my line from the beginning, and Daniel had agreed back when agreeing made him look like a good husband. In early September, I logged into the joint account to check a utility payment and noticed a restaurant charge that made no sense. It was in Baltimore, a place I had never suggested we go, a place Daniel would have called overpriced. That night, I asked while we were putting dishes in the dishwasher, "Hey, what is Harborview Steakhouse?" He didn't turn around. He said, "Probably a client dinner." A client dinner? $270? I tried to keep my voice light. On a Saturday? He finally looked at me then, his eyes sharp. "Do you want me to stop working?" The question was a trap. I felt it close around me. I said, "No, I just didn't recognize it." He smiled, but it was thin. "If I have to justify every line item, Rowan, we have bigger problems." He walked away, leaving me with a plate in my hand and a feeling like I had been scolded for asking a reasonable question. After that, more little things stacked up. His phone never left his pocket. He flipped it face down on every surface. He started taking calls outside, stepping onto the back porch even when it was cold. He changed his passcode. I only knew because one night he asked me to set a timer while his hands were covered in marinade, and I typed the old code without thinking. It buzzed red. Wrong passcode. Daniel watched my face like he was bracing for impact. I said, "Oh, you changed it?" He shrugged. "Company policy, cybersecurity training, you know." Then he reached for the phone and his fingers were too fast, too practiced, like he was hiding a card trick. I did not confront him. I did not cry into my pillow. I did not call my friends and announce my marriage was collapsing. I did what I have always done when something feels off in business. I started paying attention. Not like a detective, not like I was hunting for a villain, more like I was collecting data points because my instincts kept tapping me on the shoulder and I was tired of pretending I couldn't hear them. One afternoon, I was in line at Bay First Federal, the small branch near the water where half the tellers knew you by name. I had gone in to deposit cash from the boutique. While I waited, I watched a woman at the counter talking quietly about removing someone from her account. She looked exhausted, but she was steady. The teller slid paperwork toward her like it was routine. Something in my chest shifted. When I got to the window, I asked the teller, a man named Warren who always wore novelty socks, "Can I open a separate savings account, just in my name?" He smiled. "Absolutely. Are we saving for something fun?" I heard myself say, "Something like that." I opened the account. I set it up at a different institution too, a bigger bank, just in case. I changed my direct deposit for the boutique's owner draw. I did not drain anything. I did not touch the joint money beyond what we already used for bills. I simply rerouted my own income the way you reroute water when you see a crack forming in a dam. I told myself it was prudent. I told myself I was being mature. I told myself couples should have financial independence anyway. The truth was uglier. The truth was I was preparing to be left, and I hated myself for needing to. The week after I did it, Daniel came home with a new watch on his wrist, sleek and expensive. He held his arm out like a joke. "Nice, right?" he said. I raised my eyebrows. "Did you get a raise?" He laughed. "I told you I'm up for a promotion." He kissed my cheek and walked upstairs, leaving the faint smell of a women's perfume trail behind him, something sweet and bright. I stood in our hallway looking at the staircase, and I realized I had two choices. I could pretend I was imagining it, or I could keep protecting myself quietly until the truth got tired of hiding. Now the truth had arrived as a text message with a laugh attached. Sitting at the kitchen table, I scrolled back through the thread with Daniel, through weeks of short replies and delayed responses. I took screenshots of anything that felt relevant, not because I wanted to build a case like a movie, but because I had learned that memories get questioned. Screenshots do not. Another message came in while I was still staring at the screen. "Stop acting like a victim. I planned this. You should have seen it coming." I felt my hands tighten around the phone. "Planned this?" He said it like he was proud. I didn't answer. I took the screenshot. I emailed it to myself. Then his phone number lit up the screen, and for the first time all night, I felt a flare of something hot. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Rowan," he said, his voice too calm, like we were discussing a contractor estimate. I said, "What did you do?" He exhaled like I was annoying him. "I told you I'm done. I took what was ours. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being managed." Managed. That word hit me harder than the divorce. I kept my voice even. "You drained the account." He chuckled. "It's a joint account. It's my money too. Don't start with the martyr thing." There was a pause, and in the background I heard the hollow echo of an airport announcement, muffled but unmistakable. "Are you at the airport?" I asked. He hesitated, then leaned into his arrogance. "Yeah, and before you get any ideas, I already booked everything. First class, hotel in South Beach. Avery deserves something nice." Avery deserves something nice. My stomach dropped, and then, oddly, steadied. My mind latched on to the one clean detail. Booked everything. First class, hotel, joint account, joint card. "You used the card?" I asked and kept my voice flat, like I was confirming a shipment. Daniel snorted. "Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? It's attached to the account. Don't worry, you'll figure it out. You always do. That's what you're good at, handling things. I'm done handling you." He hung up. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection faint in the glass like a ghost of myself. My heartbeat was steady, heavy, like a drum. I did not feel victorious. I felt focused. I found Rachel Moore's number from a business card tucked in my desk drawer. She had helped a vendor friend with a custody agreement years ago. I called expecting voicemail. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp. "Rachel Moore?" I said, "Rachel, this is Rowan Pierce. I'm sorry it's late." There was a brief pause, then warmth. "Rowan, are you okay?" I looked around my quiet kitchen. I wasn't okay in the way people mean when they ask that question, but I was functional. My husband just texted me for a divorce. He drained our joint account. He's traveling right now, and he admitted he used our joint credit card for flights and a hotel. Rachel inhaled slowly. "Okay, I need you to stay calm and do exactly what I say." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because calm was the only thing I had. "I'm calm," I said. "Good," she said. "Do not text him anything threatening. Do not argue. Save everything. Screenshots, call logs, bank records. Tomorrow morning, I want you to come to my office. Tonight, call the card issuer and remove his authorized access if you can. Also, call the bank fraud line. They may not call it theft if he's on the account, but the timing and intent matter, especially if he's admitting it in writing. Intent matters." That phrase clicked into place like a lock. I hung up and called the number on the back of the card, the one we had used for years for groceries and gas and boring adult life. I listened to the automated menu and pressed the options with steady fingers. A representative named Carla came on the line. "How can I help you tonight?" I said, "My husband is an authorized user, and I need to revoke his access immediately. There are charges being made that I did not consent to." Carla asked security questions. I answered. My voice sounded like someone else's, a woman handling a problem, not a woman whose life had been kicked open. Carla said, "I can remove the authorized user and put a temporary freeze on new charges. If there are existing travel bookings, you may need to dispute them after they post." I said, "Do it." When the call ended, I stared at my hands on the table. They were still, no shaking. I pictured Daniel standing at a gate somewhere under fluorescent lights, phone in his hand, confident and smug. I pictured him telling Avery not to worry, that he had everything handled, that his wife would just roll over the way he thought I always did. I did not picture revenge. I pictured a door closing. Upstairs, my bedroom was the same, the quilts folded at the foot of the bed, Daniel's dresser drawers slightly open because he never fully shut them. I stood in the doorway and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, heavy enough to bend my knees. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the faucet. The sound of running water filled the space, grounding me. I splashed my face and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red around the edges, but dry. My mouth was set in a line I recognized from business negotiations, from times a supplier tried to push me around and I had smiled politely while refusing to budge. I turned off the lights and went back downstairs. I sat again at the kitchen table with my laptop open, bank statements on the screen, screenshots in a folder, dates written neatly in my notes. Outside, the street was silent. Inside, the house hummed softly with heat. And somewhere in Florida, my husband still believed his little victory lap was about to begin. Chapter 3. The next morning started like any other morning I had ever forced myself through, except every familiar sound felt sharp. The coffee maker clicking on, the heat kicking in, my phone lighting up with notifications I did not want to see. I had barely slept. I dozed in short bursts on top of the quilt, waking up every time I thought I heard Daniel's key in the lock, even though I knew he wasn't coming back. When the sun finally came up, pale and cold through the kitchen window, I sat at the table again and opened my laptop like it was a shield. The bank had emailed a confirmation of my call. The card issuer had emailed another. I created a folder and saved everything. Screenshots, call logs, statements. It felt clinical, but it also felt like the only way to keep my head above water. Then my phone rang. The screen showed Carol Pierce, my mother-in-law. I stared at the name for a full 3 rings before I answered. "Rowan?" Her voice came through tight and shaky, the kind of shaky that can mean fear or anger, depending on who is holding it. What is going on? I swallowed. Carol, I'm not sure what Daniel told you, but he texted me last night. He said he wants a divorce. There was a pause, a breath. He is devastated. Do you understand that? He says you have been pushing him away for years. I felt my jaw clench. The speed at which my life was being rewritten by other people was almost dizzying. I didn't push him away, I said carefully. He left. He also emptied our joint account. Carol gasped like I'd slapped her. He said you were going to do something like this. He said you were going to make him look like a monster. Carol, he put it in writing, I said. He wrote that he drained the account. He wrote that he is traveling with someone else. That girl, she snapped. He told me her name is Avery. He said she is just a friend. I looked at the kitchen table, at the neat lines I typed into my notes. I heard Rachel's voice again. Stay calm, save everything. I'm not going to argue, I said. I'm going to read you what he sent me. Carol cut in quickly. Rowan, don't do that. You don't need to be dramatic. Something in me went still. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being accurate. I took a breath. Then I read the message exactly as it was, word for word. I did not add emotion. I did not embellish. I let Daniel's voice do the damage all on its own. When I finished, there was silence. Not the kind of silence where someone is thinking of the next point to make. The kind of silence where someone realizes the ground beneath them is not what they thought. I heard a small sound on the other end, like Carol had covered the receiver with her hand. Then another voice came through, sharp and familiar. Jenna, this is Jenna, Daniel's sister. Jenna Pierce had always been confident, loud, the kind of woman who could turn any dinner conversation into a courtroom where she played both judge and prosecutor. Jenna, I said. I just want to understand why you're doing this, she said. Mom says you froze his card. You know how humiliating that is for him. I almost laughed, but it came out as a dry exhale. I didn't freeze his card to humiliate him, I said. I revoked his access because he used our joint credit card to book travel after he told me he drained our joint account. He admitted it. He admitted it to you, Jenna repeated, like she was testing the words. Yes, I said, in writing. Another silence. Carol spoke again, softer now. Rowan, honey, marriage is hard. Men make mistakes. You can be the bigger person. You can be gentle. He is under a lot of stress. There it was, the expectation, the unspoken rule that I should be the one to smooth things over, even when I was the one bleeding. I have been gentle, I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't angry, it was tired. I'm not going to beg a man who laughed at me in a text message. Carol's breath hitched. Jenna did not respond at all. I waited. I could have filled the space with explanations, with details, with my side of the story. I didn't. I let their silence stay. Finally, Jenna said, I need to talk to Daniel. That makes sense, I said. Carol did not apologize. She did not say she was wrong. She just sounded smaller when she said, I didn't know. I know, I said. Neither did I. Not like this. I ended the call and stared at my phone, my hands suddenly cold. That conversation took 10 minutes, and it felt like I ran miles. I was still processing it when a notification popped up. New email. Sender, Daniel Pierce. Subject line, divorce. I clicked it before I could stop myself. He had typed a long message, the kind of messages men write when they want to sound reasonable while doing something unreasonable. He said he had been unhappy. He said I cared more about my store than my husband. He said he had sacrificed so much and gotten nothing in return. Then he got to the point. He wanted half of Harbor and Hush. My throat tightened. My store was not a hobby. It was my livelihood. It was payroll for Kiara and the part-time girls who worked weekends. It was rent, inventory, insurance, taxes, all the things that made it real. Daniel wrote that he had supported me emotionally, that he had helped with ideas, that he had been a part of building it. He wrote that if he didn't cooperate, he would make sure I spent more on attorneys than the store was worth. My urge to throw the laptop across the room came back. Instead, I did what I'd been doing since last night. I saved it, I forwarded it to myself, I took a screenshot of the entire thing. Then I called Rachel. She answered on the first ring, rowing. I got an email. My voice shook a little this time. I hated that it did. He's demanding half of my business. Forward it to me, Rachel said. Do not respond to him. I haven't, I said. He's threatening to bleed me dry with legal fees. Rachel's voice stayed steady. Threatening is not the same as winning. Your business is an LLC, correct? Yes, I said. Harbor and Hush LLC. It has always been in my name, separate accounts, separate taxes. Good, she said. That matters. He can threaten all he wants, but he cannot invent ownership. Also, the way he is writing these emails is helpful. Helpful? I asked. It shows intent. It shows he is focused on money and control. Keep saving everything. After I hung up, I drove to the boutique because routine was still my lifeline. The streets were busy with normal people doing normal things, and I felt like I was watching them through glass. Inside Harbor and Hush, Kiara looked up from the register the moment I walked in. She saw my face and her expression shifted. You didn't sleep, she said. I slept enough, I lied. She came around the counter. Do you want me to call someone? Your sister? A friend? I shook my head. Not yet. I just need to get through today. Kiara studied me. Okay, then tell me what you need. That simple question nearly broke me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was the first time since the text message that anyone had asked what I needed instead of telling me what I should do. I need to keep the store steady. I need payroll to run like normal, and I need you to flag anything weird, any calls, any messages. If someone says Daniel's name, you tell me. Kiara nodded. Done. An hour later, Grace Morgan walked in. Grace was in her 50s later, the kind of customer who had watched me grow this place from an empty storefront into something real. She always wore pearl studs and carried herself like she'd survived things and didn't need to prove it. She took one look at me and lowered her voice. Honey, you look like you've been hit by a truck. I forced a smile. Just a rough night. Grace reached across the counter and touched my hand. Do not let that man make you small, you hear me? My throat tightened again. I'm trying, I said. Grace leaned in. You don't try, you do. And if anyone starts whispering, you send them to me. I've got time today. I almost smiled real then because there was something fierce in her, something protective that didn't ask permission. Later that afternoon, another email from Daniel arrived. This one was longer. He was angrier. He accused me of stealing from him by freezing the card. He wrote he would tell everyone I was unstable, that I was controlling, that I was financially abusive. He slipped again, the way arrogant people always do. He mentioned the travel bookings. He mentioned the hotel. He complained about being embarrassed at the airport. He complained about being forced to change plans. He blamed me for consequences of his own choices. I read it once and felt my stomach go cold. Then I forwarded it to Rachel without a word. Rachel called me back within 10 minutes. Rowan, she said, and I could hear a hint of satisfaction under her professionalism. He's making this easier for us. What do you mean? I asked. He's putting his intent in writing, Rachel said. He's threatening retaliation. He's admitting facts. It is not a confession in the criminal sense, but it is extremely useful in family court. Family court. The words felt heavy, like walking into a room I never wanted to enter. That evening, after I locked up the store and Kiara hugged me goodbye like she was trying to lend me some of her strength, I sat in my office at the back of Harbor and Hush and stared at my inbox. My phone buzzed with a new email from Rachel. The subject line was hearing. My heart thumped hard once, then steadied. I opened it and read. Rachel had filed for an emergency hearing in Anne Arundel County. A date was set. Not tomorrow, not instantly, but soon enough that I felt the air change around me. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The fight was no longer just in my kitchen, in my phone, in Daniel's smug little messages. It had moved into a room with a judge, a clerk, and a stack of papers that would decide what parts of my life stayed mine. I sat there in the quiet of my office, listening to the distant hum of the street outside, and for the first time since the text message, I let myself feel the weight of what was coming. Chapter 4. The weight didn't feel dramatic. It felt practical, like a bill you know is coming and can't ignore. I left the boutique after closing and drove home with the radio off. I tried to eat a real dinner and ended up pushing pasta around a plate until it went cold. I laid out documents on the dining table the way I used to lay out purchase orders. Bank statements, printouts of Daniel's texts, the email where he demanded half my business, a copy of my LLC paperwork Rachel told me to bring. When I finally climbed into bed, the sheets smelled like clean laundry and something faintly familiar that made my stomach twist. I slept in short bursts again, waking up to the quiet hum of the heater and the absence of his breathing beside me. By morning, the sky was a flat gray. Rachel's office called to confirm our time, and the sound of another human voice steadied me more than coffee ever could. I met Rachel in the courthouse parking lot. She stood near her car with a folder tucked under her arm and a look on her face that said she had done this 100 times and still took it seriously. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I slept enough to function," I told her. "Function is the goal today," she said. "Nothing more." We walked toward the entrance. The building was all concrete and glass. No romance, no drama. Just a place built to process people. Inside, security lines moved slowly. A man argued with the guard about his belt. A woman clutched a manila envelope so tight her knuckles were white. Someone's toddler cried and echoed off the walls. Rachel leaned close. "Keep your answer short," she said. "If you feel like explaining, don't. Let the documents do it." "I can do short," I said. The waiting area outside the courtroom had rows of plastic chairs and a bulletin board covered in notices no one ever read. The air smelled like wet wool coats and stale coffee. We sat and waited while the clerk called other cases. Daniel arrived 10 minutes late, like he was still trying to control the rhythm of the room. He wore a dark suit and the new watch I'd seen weeks ago. His expression was calm, almost bored, like this was an inconvenience he would handle and move past. He wasn't alone. Tom Caldwell walked beside him, gray suit, sharp eyes, carrying a slim briefcase like a weapon. Daniel spotted me and gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Rowan," he said. Rachel stood slightly in front of me. "Mr. Pierce?" she said. Daniel's gaze flicked over her shoulder, settling on me again. "Are you done with the performance?" he asked, low enough that only we could hear. I didn't answer. Tom cleared his throat politely. "Miss Moore, we can try to resolve this without unnecessary theatrics." Rachel's voice stayed even. "There is nothing theatrical about documented financial depletion." Daniel gave a short laugh. "It was a joint account," he said. "She's acting like I robbed a bank." I finally looked at him. "I texted you that you planned it. That isn't a misunderstanding." His smile flattened. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he didn't expect me to speak at all. A clerk opened the door and called our case. The hallway shifted, people leaning in, hungry for the distraction of someone else's pain. We walked into the courtroom. The room was colder than the hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly. The judge's bench was raised, but the rest of it felt like an office, not a stage. A court reporter sat to one side. The clerk arranged papers with brisk efficiency. Judge Harris entered and took his seat. He was older, hair silver at the temples, expression neutral. He didn't look at either of us like we were heroes or villains. He looked like we were files that needed sorting. "Good morning," he said. "We are here on an emergency motion regarding marital funds and temporary orders." Rachel stood. "Your Honor, my client Rowan Pierce requests a temporary restraining order on marital assets and an order requiring Mr. Pierce to return funds he withdrew from the joint account immediately after informing her of divorce by text message and leaving the state." Tom stood smoothly. "Your Honor, this is a joint account. Mr. Pierce is a named holder. He withdrew funds he is legally entitled to access. Additionally, he has supported his spouse and her business throughout the marriage and should not be treated as a criminal for exercising his rights." Judge Harris looked down at the papers, then up at Daniel. "Mr. Pierce, did you withdraw the funds in question?" he asked. Daniel straightened. "Yes, Your Honor, but it was joint. I withdrew what I believed was fair." Judge Harris's eyes didn't change. "Fair is not the standard today. The standard is whether a temporary order is necessary to prevent immediate harm." Rachel opened her folder and stepped forward. "Your Honor, we would like to submit Mr. Pierce's written admissions." Tom lifted a hand. "Objection. Text messages and emails are easily manipulated." Rachel didn't blink. "We have device records, timestamps, and my client can testify to receipt. These messages show intent and timing." Judge Harris paused, then nodded. "I will consider them for limited purposes. Proceed." Rachel handed copies to the clerk. The court reporter's fingers moved, quiet and relentless. Judge Harris read. His eyes moved across the page, slower when he reached Daniel's lines about draining the account and planning it. He looked up. "Mr. Pierce, did you send this message?" he asked. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I was angry." Judge Harris held the page up slightly. "You wrote, 'I drained the joint account.' You wrote, 'I planned this.' You wrote, 'I am heading to Miami with Avery.' You ended with a laugh. Are you disputing any of that?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "No, Your Honor, but it was a joint account." Tom stepped in quickly. "Your Honor, access to a joint account is not theft. There is no criminal allegation before the court." Judge Harris set the paper down. "No one has said the word theft, but intent and timing matter in family court, and your client's messages are not helping him." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph, just the relief of being seen clearly by someone who had no reason to protect me or punish me, only to apply rules. Rachel continued. "Your Honor, we also have documentation that the home is titled solely in my client's name and was acquired prior to the marriage. Additionally, her business, Harbor and Hush LLC, is a separate legal entity formed years ago with separate accounts and tax filings. Mr. Pierce has threatened in writing to bleed her financially through litigation unless she gives him half of her business." Tom's expression flickered for the first time, irritation slipping through the professional mask. "Your Honor, division of property is not before the court today." Rachel nodded. "Not for final division, only to show motive and attempted leverage, and to show why immediate protection is necessary." Judge Harris looked at me. "Mrs. Pierce, answer directly. Do you rely on that joint account for household bills?" "Yes, Your Honor. Mortgage and utilities were drafted from it." "Do you have another source of funds?" "I own the boutique, but the business account pays payroll and operating expenses. I can cover some bills, but draining the joint account created an immediate gap." Judge Harris turned to Daniel. "Mr. Pierce, did you make any arrangements to ensure shared obligations were covered after withdrawing the funds?" Daniel opened his mouth. Tom touched him, but Daniel spoke anyway. "She has money," he said. "She runs that store. She'll figure it out. She always figures it out." Judge Harris stared at him for a beat too long. This court is not interested in assumptions. It is interested in responsibility. Daniel's face flushed, anger rising. Your Honor, she froze my card. She embarrassed me. She is punishing me. Judge Harris's tone stayed even. Mr. Pierce, the court does not care about embarrassment. The court cares about compliance, stability, and preventing harm. Rachel glanced at me, just for a second. It wasn't a smile, it was acknowledgement. Judge Harris looked down at his notes again. Silence filled the room, heavy and clean. Then he spoke. I am granting temporary relief. Marital funds are to be preserved. Mr. Pierce is restrained from further depletion of joint assets. Counsel will submit an order requiring repayment of withdrawn funds on an accelerated schedule. Any violations will be considered contempt. Daniel's confidence cracked so quickly I could almost hear it. His eyes darted to Tom, then back to the judge. Your Honor, he started, but Tom cut in quickly. Understood. We will comply with the temporary order. Judge Harris's gaze sharpened. One more thing, he said, looking at Daniel. Your communications show contempt and a willingness to use money as a weapon. I strongly suggest you change course. This court will not reward posturing. Daniel swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. Quieter now. Judge Harris nodded once. Next steps will be scheduled through the clerk. We are done. It was over in minutes, but my body reacted like I had run a marathon. My legs felt unsteady as we stepped back into the hallway. People shifted out of our way, some curious, some sympathetic, most just relieved it wasn't them. Rachel asked softly, Do you want to sit for a minute before we talk about the next order? I nodded and walked to the edge of the steps, letting the wind pull at my hair. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt like I could breathe again, and for the Chapter 5. Enough did not mean easy. It meant I could finally stop bracing for the next hit. Rachel and I stood on the courthouse steps a few minutes longer than we needed to. The wind cut through my coat, sharp and clean, and it helped. It reminded me I was still in my body, still in my life, still here. In the car, Rachel laid out next steps in the same calm tone she used when she talked about temporary orders and compliance, like she was explaining a routine process instead of the unraveling of a marriage. She told me what the judge's order did and did not do. She told me what to expect from Daniel next, because men like him did not like being told no in public. She told me to keep saving everything, every text, every email, every voicemail. She told me to keep my answers short if he tried to bait me. I listened, nodded, thanked her. Then I drove home and sat in my driveway for a moment before going inside, letting the quiet settle around me like a blanket. Daniel tried to pretend the hearing did not matter. He texted me that night, not an apology, not even an attempt at civility, just a bitter little jab about how I thought I was clever. I did not respond. I forwarded it to Rachel and put my phone face down on the counter like I had done the first night. 2 days later, I got a notification from the card issuer that the disputed travel charges had posted, flights and a hotel deposit, both in Florida, both on the account Daniel assumed would keep paying for his new life. I filed the disputes the way Carla had told me to, calmly, methodically, like I was returning damaged merchandise. I did not feel revenge. I felt boundaries. The following week, Kiara told me someone had called the store asking for Daniel. The woman would not leave a name, only a clipped message that she needed to speak to him urgently. Kiara leaned into my office doorway with her arms crossed. She said, "Something is up. Do you want me to tell people he doesn't work here?" I shook my head. I said, "If anyone asks, tell them the business is running as usual and I am not taking personal messages. That's it." Kiara nodded, eyes steady. She had my back in the simple way that mattered. A few days after that, Grace came in with a garment bag and a look on her face like she was ready to fight. She set the bag on the counter and lowered her voice. She said, "I ran into your husband at the grocery store." My stomach tightened. I kept my hands busy with the register. I said, "And?" Grace's eyes narrowed. She said, "He looked like hell, and he was with a girl who looked like she was trying to decide if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life." I did not ask for details. I didn't want to make Grace feel like I needed gossip to survive. But she offered them anyway, because women like Grace understood that truth is a kind of medicine. She said, "He kept telling her to calm down, like he was the reasonable one, like she was the problem." That was Daniel's favorite trick. He painted himself as the calm one, even when he was the storm. I thanked Grace and changed the subject to the dress she was picking up. When she left, I sat for a moment in my office and stared at the wall, not because I missed him, but because I recognized a pattern I had lived inside for years. Daniel did not stop manipulating when I stopped listening. He simply looked for a new audience. 2 weeks later, Daniel's mother called again. Carol's voice sounded different now, not sharp, not righteous, more like someone holding a fragile thing and unsure what to do with it. She asked if I had a minute. I almost said no. Then I said yes. Carol told me Daniel was staying at her house. Not a temporary visit, not a quick weekend, but living there. She said he had returned from Florida angry and embarrassed, and he blamed everyone but himself. She said, "He keeps saying you ruined him." I let that land. Ruined him. As if I had dragged him to an airport and forced him to book flights on a shared card while laughing in a text message. I said, "Carol, he ruined his own plan." Carol did not argue. She didn't have Jenna's fire, or maybe the fire had burned out. She said, "I didn't know he would do all this. The money, the threats. That text you read me, I can't get it out of my head." I waited. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't punish her either. I simply let her sit with the truth. Carol finally said, "Are you okay?" It wasn't the question that mattered. It was that she asked it without telling me what I should do. I answered honestly. I said, "I'm surviving." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the window over the sink. The lemon candle was still on the counter. The home sign was still on the wall. I walked over, lifted it off the nail, and put it in a drawer. Small changes, quiet changes, the kind that add up. The HR investigation arrived the way consequences often do, not with a bang, but with an email forwarded to the wrong place. One afternoon, while I was reviewing invoices, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. The message was short. "This is Megan from HR. Daniel listed you as an emergency contact. We need to update records." I stared at the screen, a cold little laugh rising in my throat. Daniel had listed me, after everything. Rachel handled it. She told me not to respond directly. She drafted a short email redirecting HR to Daniel and noting we were separated and communication should go through appropriate channels. Clean, professional, no emotion. It was exactly the opposite of how Daniel operated. Later, Kiara asked if I was okay again. I told her yes. Then I told her the truth I hadn't said out loud yet. I said, "I think he thought I would spend months begging him to come back." Kiara's face tightened. She said, "That's because he doesn't know you." She was right. Or maybe he never wanted to. The boutique kept running. That was the part people do not understand when they imagine divorce as a dramatic pause in life. Bills still arrive, payroll still has to be met, customers still need hemming and reassurance, and a mirror that tells them they look good. Some days I felt like a robot. Other days I felt like a woman coming back into herself, one decision at a time. I changed the passwords on everything. I updated my beneficiary forms. I set my phone to stop showing Daniel's name with a heart. I removed the heart and left the name. Then a week later, I removed the name too. At night, the house felt larger. The quiet had edges. I found myself listening for sounds that never came and then catching myself, annoyed that any part of me was still trained to anticipate him. But gradually, the anticipation faded. The fear dulled. the constant need to defend my reality stopped being my default. One evening, I stayed late at the store to finish a window display. I turned off the overhead lights and left the front lamps glowing, soft and warm. I stood in the doorway of my office and looked out at the racks, the folded sweaters, the small world I had built. It occurred to me that I hadn't thought about Daniel for a full hour. Not his insults, not his threats, not his face in the courtroom. Just nothing. The realization hit me harder than the judge's order could ever. This was what winning looked like. Not watching him lose, not savoring his embarrassment, not counting the ways his life collapsed. Winning looked like being able to breathe without checking over my shoulder. Winning looked like my business staying steady, my people getting paid, my home staying mine, my mind finally quiet. If you're still here listening, I want you to hear this part clearly. Protecting yourself is not selfish. Preparing is not paranoia. Sometimes the quiet choices you make, saving a message, opening a separate account, asking one hard question, are the only reason you get to stand up later and say, I am still here. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments what part you recognized or what you wish someone had told you sooner. And if you want more stories like this, the kind where calm beats chaos and consequences arrive without shouting, stay with me here.